Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. I should preface this morning's briefing by pointing out to the YouTube censors who may come across this video and who like to attack subjects like this, we're asking common sense questions about why it is that Kamala Harris receives questions when it comes to whether or not she identifies as black. This question has been following Kamala for several years now, and it is not against any sort of community guidelines to explore why it is that so many people have been asking that question for so long. Kamala Harris's ethnic background happens to be back in the news again, but for a slightly different reason than you might expect. Donald Trump has been pathetically trying to build up his MAGA cred by basically showing that he can still slap black folks in the face. In this case, his target of choice was the National Association of Black Journalists. So basically, you got Negroes who work for the white media is who these guys are. They call themselves black journalists, but all of them, they're sitting here working for the white media. That means that they toe all the white media's lines, and they're essentially totally invested in maintaining the status quo. When they call themselves black journalists, the black part is just branding. Now, as I've explained in recent videos, the kind of Negroes who make up the NABJ are the same kinds of people that Kamala Harris went to college with. These are the wannabe talented 10th type, like the Mark Lamont Shills or the Roly-Poly Martins. These are the kind of Negroes who think to themselves that their fraternity and sorority ties are going to put them on easy street. They got their little networks for themselves worked out, and as far as they're concerned, they're the head Negroes in charge. So these are the kind of individuals who populate the NABJ. So why would they accept Donald Trump's invitation to talk to them? Because no matter what little old job they may seem to have with the white media, no matter what panel they happen to be on, or if they got themselves some sort of column with the New York Times or the Washington Post or some sort of magazine, they know that they haven't been accepted by white power. They're just mascots for the team. So when a Trump comes along and says that he'll talk to them, they have to accept his invitation, even though they know exactly what he's going to do, because otherwise they're just totally shut out. And the orange man knew that too, so he used his little trip there as an opportunity to slap these chumps in the face, and they deserved it. Because there's absolutely nothing surprising about what Trump did and what Trump said. Of course he's going to show up and he's going to say things that he thinks are disparaging about Kamala Harris that they will be offended by. Of course he's going to do that. I'm sure that his MAGA supporters were at home laughing at how dumb the NABJ is for allowing him to do that. This is what happens when clout chasing goes wrong. Trump insulted them to their faces, and they had to take it because having Trump come and talk to them was the most significant newsworthy thing to happen to this professional do-nothing organization in years. It got plenty of headlines, and in the white media, that's the most important thing. At least for a couple of news cycles, the NABJ is relevant. But Trump's not worried about losing black support due to his remarks because he knows that he doesn't have black support to begin with. He's not counting on black voters to win the election. And this puts the lie, by the way, to the white leftist media claiming that Trump was wooing black male voters. You haven't heard anyone trying to drag out that lie since this all went down. This little display by Trump was meant to delight the racists that he calls his base. This is like meth for them. Now, what he had said was that Kamala Harris had previously identified herself only as Asian, but she began to identify as black when she wanted to run for high office. Now, as with so much else that Trump says, he's got it exactly backwards. Kamala Harris went to an HBCU, she got down with Willie Brown back in the day, and she was doing the sister girl routine to beat the band, trying to use the black community as her base. But when she crashed and burned in her disastrous 2020 presidential run, and then became Biden's vice president afterwards, she started to change her tune. Suddenly, she was identifying as Asian. Whenever she would go in front of the media, she would remind everybody, hey, her mother's from India. See, she ain't been playing up the I'm part black thing for a while now, so Trump is way behind the curve on that one. Now, the elephant in the room with Donald Trump's remarks is apparently the National Association of Black Journalists and a lot of other people in the white media apparently are concerned that Trump is about to try to drum up some more birtherism, like he did against Barack Obama. Now, his attempts to try to claim that Barack Obama was not born in the United States fell flat. Barack Obama eventually released his long-form birth certificate, and Trump quietly dropped that accusation. Now, the uproar and furor over Trump's remarks is largely overblown and exaggerated by people who are just pretending to be offended by the fact that Trump said something about how she identified herself. But the truth of the matter is Kamala Harris's race is going to be a subject of controversy precisely because it is a mystery. Because what seems to have made the National Association of Black Journalists types the most angry was when Trump said that she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person. Then he added on to that, I think somebody should look into that too. And that seems to be what set them off. When he said, hey, as far as her ethnic background goes, there's question marks about it, at least the way she's been identifying herself. Why isn't somebody asking any questions? That seems to be what made them so angry. Let's get one thing straight. It is not a crazy or out of bounds thing to ask. Rachel Dolezal built an entire career for herself claiming to be black and convincing certain so-called black organizations that she was. She claimed to be black, told everybody she was, and when her ruse was exposed, she still said that she felt black. Why? Because she didn't like certain members of her white birth family. That's the reason why. She was on the outs with her white family members, so she decided to try to reinvent herself as being a black woman. So there is precedent for this kind of thing where there's people who identify one way when they actually are something else. Kamala Harris claims to be black. True. But her claim is based on her father. And nowhere has Donald Harris said that he was black. But as black people, we're being told that Kamala Harris is half black, and because of that, she deserves black support. And it's very interesting that the white media has been doing the most to basically be the cheerleader for Kamala Harris is definitely the embodiment of what it means to be black in America. That's what the entire narrative from the white media is. Kamala Harris is Black America. Well, recently the New York Times ran an editorial column entitled, Who's Afraid of Being Black? Not Kamala, Beyonce, or Kendrick. Talk about going overboard with the name dropping. Somebody needs to learn some restraint with their writing. And speaking of writing, this piece was written by a woman named Salamisha Tillett. Now, of course, when I saw that woman's name, I wondered whether or not she perhaps had an immigrant background just like Kamala Harris. Was she the child of immigrants? I clicked on her name on the New York Times article and it gave her bio, part of which says that she went to the University of Pennsylvania. I did about 2 seconds of Googling and I found a University of Pennsylvania website, in fact a number of them, that had stories about Miss Tillett, and they mentioned that her father is from Trinidad, and that she herself had lived in Trinidad and went to middle school there. Gee, it reminds me of Barack Obama. He went to school in Jakarta as a child, and it also reminds me of Kamala Harris. She went to school in Canada. So I find it amazing this woman is talking about Kamala Harris not being afraid of being black, when the reality is a lot of Trinidadians will fistfight you if you try to call them black. It seems like this opinion piece was written to be a feeble refutation of the black media's reporting on how Kamala has only occasionally referred to herself as black, and for a while now has been referring to herself primarily as Asian. She lets her surrogates and supporters call her black now, but she's quietly stopped doing it. And for the record, all the white media articles simply say that her father, Donald Harris, is Jamaican. Well, as the black media has told you for the longest time, there's white Jamaicans. It's a British colony after all, and there's Indians who live there and collaborated with the white rulers, and there's also mixed-race Jamaicans, most of whom don't identify as black, and then you have the black Jamaicans. The question is, where is Donald Harris at to declare that he's one of these black Jamaicans? Where's he at to declare that he's black at all? All we've ever seen are white media articles simply saying that he's Jamaican, and claiming that, well, because of Jamaican, that's the reason why Kamala Harris can claim to be black, because of this guy who's from Jamaica. But with Kamala Harris, there might be a little bit more traction. The main reason why is her birth certificate doesn't give Donald Harris's race. Instead, it simply lists him as Jamaican. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris's mother is identified on her birth certificate as her race being Caucasian. She's not listed as Indian or even as Asian, even though that was a classification at the time of Kamala's birth. And her mother wasn't listed as either of those. Instead, she was listed as Caucasian. Meanwhile, Donald Harris is listed as Jamaican for both his nationality and his race. But as I just got through stating, Jamaican is not a skin color, nor a race, any more than American is or Indian. And remember, on Kamala's birth certificate, they don't list her mother's race as Indian. She's listed as Caucasian. So if Jamaican is supposed to be some sort of euphemism for black, then why didn't they list Kamala's mother as Indian, just like her nationality? Where is the admission on Donald Harris's part, or the documentation that says he is black? Because he's the only one who can answer that. Kamala's birth certificate certainly doesn't. The white media assertion that she is black simply because he's from Jamaica, that's only empty conjecture on their part. Neither Donald Harris nor any other documentation that's come to light shows him as identifying as black. Now, one would think, especially being from Jamaica, there ought to be tons of documentation saying that he's black. Yet there's precious little that can be found about the man, and what little documentation we do have only lists where he's from, not what race he is. Sure, there have been some people in the past who have said, well, there might have been an interview or something where he claimed to have said, we don't have this man on camera saying anything. And we don't have any sort of deposition or documentation or any sort of clues as to him actually saying that. So sorry, but the claim that this man happens to be black, there's a huge question mark on that because we don't actually have solid verifiable proof that he did. It's usually some sort of hearsay from some third party. If Kamala and her boosters want to claim that Trump is wrong for saying she only just started calling herself black, then the best way to shut him up is to prove that Kamala's father identifies as black. That would settle all questions. So far, even after all these decades in the public eye, Kamala hasn't done so. Now, there's some in the white media who are saying that Trump is recycling his birtherism attack on Obama. The man is very bereft of original ideas, so I'll go ahead and cop to that one for him. Sure, of course he's recycling birtherism. Trump is a dyed-in-the-wool racist. He's been one his entire adult life, and this is par for the course for him. There's nothing new here. You can be disgusted, but don't try to act like you're surprised. Trump's rhetoric is meant for his base, for people who already agree with him. The only way that his words can backfire on him is if the black vote mobilizes. But that's not in Trump's hands. It's in Kamala's. And her entire gimmick, her entire political shtick has been to try to get black support under the guise of racial solidarity. That this woman has something in common with us. After all, she's from Oakland, and she was allegedly romancing a black man, so isn't it obvious that she's black herself? No, it's not. And if she's going to be claiming that we should vote for her and support her precisely because we have something in common when it comes to race, then at the very least, it's not rude for anyone to ask, is that true? Because after Rachel Dolezal and a number of others, it would be foolish for black people to just simply say, well, this person standing in front of me claims that they've got black ancestry. We haven't looked it up. And if we even did try to look it up, we didn't actually find anything, but we'll just go ahead and take their word for it anyway. No, that's not how logic actually works. Kamala Harris is the one who claimed that she was black and also claimed that black people should support her as a result. You got to support other black people, right? But everything that this woman has done in her entire adult life has been self-serving, or even worse, has actually been antagonistic, hostile, and damaging to the black community. When she was a prosecutor in San Francisco, she openly laughed and cackled like a witch, talking about how she was sending out letters saying that she was going to be locking up parents if their children skipped school. In fact, there was even the story about a homeless black woman whose children had skipped school, and apparently Kamala Harris was toying with the idea of prosecuting her for that. Yeah, because when you're homeless and on the streets, and you don't know where the heck your next meal's coming from, and you don't have a roof over your head, it's completely unreasonable for your children to actually be dysfunctional under those circumstances. Why, they should just be reporting to school as if everything is normal. Because as we all know, children growing up on the streets, that's the epitome of normal, right? This is who Kamala Harris is. She has not been a friend of the black community, and yet we've had this persistent, hyper-aggressive white media narrative that we need to be supporting Kamala Harris no matter what, and don't worry about all that stuff that she was doing back in the day, or what she's been doing more recently, or rather I should say what she hasn't been doing for the black community more recently. We just need to go ahead and take their word for it and vote for her, full stop. Well, that's not going to happen. Because while there may not be any documentation that conclusively shows that Kamala Harris does indeed have a black father, we've got tons of documentation that this woman has spent her entire adult life attacking the black community. So when it comes to whether or not black Americans should support Kamala Harris, her birth records will carry nowhere near as much weight as her legal and political record. And no matter what the white media or those on YouTube may try to tell you, Trump is being his typical racist self, but he's not saying anything new. He's not dredging up any sort of heretofore unknown rumors about Kamala Harris. It's obvious that he follows what's being said on the internet and he's saying it out loud. And as it pertains to whether or not Kamala Harris can get black support, on the issue of black empowerment, she's made it undeniably clear exactly how she identifies. And it isn't on the side of black America. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Bo McLean, Terrence Pitts, Ronald Waits, Reginald Britt, and Amir Miller. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.